Hello, everyone.
Hey, Karen Ann has made you the host.
Ah, okay.
Is that good? You seem to be on a phone. Is that going to be a problem that you're the host, or is that
I am
gonna be
on the
okay?
phone. It should not be a problem.
Okay.
Did Mr. Bracco get in, or because I saw as I was dialing in that he was in the waiting room? He does not appear to be in, so he must still be in the waiting room. So let me. Let's see. A message, and it really said he was in the waiting room. But there we go. Bracco. Okay.
Okay. Hello, Sylvia.
Okay.
Hello.
I noticed. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I have Szalski, Rowlett, and Rufo not checked in as yet.
All right. Selsky just joined, so he's.
Okay.
Yeah, and I apologize. I've been working on my primary machine this evening, which is why I completely lost track of time, and also am dialed in, because my computer is currently on my kitchen table. It's been reassembled now, about 3 minutes ago.
Szalski. Rogers. Jeff Moulton is here.
We're at 8:45, but we'll give people a moment. It's not like I've never been late. Almost every meeting. So. Madam Secretary, just out of curiosity, where do we sit right now on primaries versus alternates?
We have 8 primaries. The only 2 absent are Rowlett and Rufo, and right now we have 2 alternates present, Dr. Moulton and Dean Rogers.
Okay, that's good. We'd at least have a full count, and we'll give the others a couple minutes show up. Mr. Brown, with his blurry camera, I have certainly I knew exactly what it was when I saw it. I've done it before. And if you want to fix that, we haven't called to order yet, so it doesn't matter. Mr. Brown, to fix that, use a Q-tip and some rubbing alcohol over the right off. Oh, 2 more in the waiting room. We got Madden. But we will give it a whirl. Got a few in here, a few folks. So we'll give it 1 more minute, and we'll.
Rogers, okay.
I'm on my phone, and I can't do anything anyway with my computer for this meeting. Laptop with me and everything. Wait a minute. More time. All right. Well, we've got a few people trying to join here. Madam Secretary, do you know, is this automatically recording? Or am how is that,
Yes, the
how is that
announcement
handled?
came on when I zoomed in that the
Okay.
recording was on.
Okay. I want to make sure we do have the recording, because definitely easier than...
The chair said it's recording to the cloud.
Okay, perfect. If that continues, we are good to go. So, that I'm not sitting outside because there's too much wildlife noise. As I get seated at my desk, we'll get underway here. I am seated at my desk, and I am looking to see if we have anyone else in the waiting room. I do not see anyone else in the waiting room. And as such, we'll go ahead and just call the meeting to order here at 8:49 p.m. Eastern Time. Madam Secretary, if you wouldn't mind calling the roll.
All right. Arrowwood, present. Bracco,
Present.
Zizelski,
Present.
Carlos,
I believe she was in expected absence.
okay. Latham,
Present.
okay. Martin,
Present.
Molman,
I am here.
okay. Rowlett, all right. Rufo, and Seebeck.
Yep.
Yes. Chair, we have Rowlett and Rufo not here as yet, and we have two alternates, Mr. Moulton or Dr. Moulton and Dean Rogers.
Okay, so we do have a full house.
Yes.
I do believe we go first into public comment, and I see that Mr. Brown has his hand up, and then Mr. Bracco also has his hand up. So unless there's an urgent point of order or something, we'll just do it in that order. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Millman. I'm not sure if you were here when I announced earlier that I probably cannot stay. And I think that maybe JJ is going to stay as long as he can, although I don't see him at the moment. Maybe he's still here. Yeah, he is still here. I'm in my wife's laboratory working on something else, and I don't know if I can stay and participate. Is it alive?
Got it.
And offer excellent parliamentary advice if you need it.
No, I'll just say it's always a pleasure to have both you and Mr. Jacobs here. As you know, I do enjoy parliamentary stuff generally. So it's always nice to have the experts here because, because it can get complicated. Thank you for that. If you're good, Mr. Brown, I'm going to go on to Mr. Bracco.
So I just wanted to bring it to the secretary's attention. I believe that Mr. Roots is also here as another alternate. He's responding in the chat as well.
Yes.
All right. And are there any other alternates here besides the three that have been called? Making sure. If more pop in, we'll deal with that as it occurs. Next, Mr. Madden has raised his hand. Go ahead, Mr. Madden.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Although presiding chair of this meeting, I just want to say that, as always, I appreciate members of the, I suppose, membership coming and at least witnessing or observing these meetings. It is highly beneficial to both sides, once for transparency and accountability, and the other for experience and, just general participation. So I just want to say thank you to the members of the public membership that are here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Looks like we've exhausted hands. I am going to try to switch this off to my laptop. And I dialed in, so in theory, this is going to work. Look at that. Oh, and, I lost my audio. Did I? Can you guys hear me or no?
I can
We
hear
can
you.
hear you.
Audio. Oh, okay. Okay, great. Excellent, excellent. And Mr. Rowlett is joining the room now as well. Just,
Okay.
okay. So with that, Madam Secretary, do we have any minutes or anything that we need to pass here at the beginning of this meeting? Any open items
I
on your side of things?
published the minutes of June 29th, and I haven't heard anything back as yet as to comments or corrections.
Okay. When was that posted?
I'm going to say a week ago.
Madam Secretary, I believe that if there was going to be an objection, it would have probably come by now. So if you were so moved to have us accept that report, we could hear such a motion at this time.
Fine. I would move to accept the minutes as published.
There's been a motion. I can't remember if we need a second, a small committee for that, but
We don't.
No.
I didn't think so. So is there any objection to accepting the minutes? The,
No
June 29th?
objection. I've been posting my comments in the chat. They were circulated on July 7th. I have not had a chance to read them completely, so I'm just going to abstain.
All right. Well, if there's nothing further, I'm not hearing objection. We will consider that passed. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Right.
As I recall, we were in the middle of a motion that was getting a lot of floor work done, and I apologize because I do not have that document in front of me, so I do not know the proposal letter. Here, where were we? I'm gonna find. Mr. Bracco, I saw you had sent an email a few days ago asking about the potential agenda for this evening. I unfortunately didn't see a follow-up if there was one, a response. Do you know, just because you asked about the letter, which one we were working on, or Madam Secretary, anybody? Does anyone know?
I believe it's
The
proposal P.
letter. Proposal P, okay.
P7.
And I believe it was going to be, I think we got, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we got back to the main motion, understanding we would come back to it at this meeting. Is that an accurate statement? We weren't in some motion to amend. We did get back to the main motion for the last meeting.
And
say that?
this
Does
is Rob
anybody object
Latham.
to
I
it?
don't know if I should. I've been trying to get the chair's attention and haven't been successful. I don't want to interrupt the chair if you're going to conduct the meeting in a certain way. I will be quiet until recognized. I just did want to say that I had been trying to contribute to your questions, but you hadn't really been making it in a way where I felt like it was appropriate for me to chime in. But I didn't want to get too far along without just, because I think we are on proposal P, which I've been working on, and I proposed a 8th substitute that I circulated in the list.
Yes, I did see that substitute, and I apologize. I try to make committees easy, right? As long as they don't talk over each other, try to make it go pretty well. I'm looking at the screen. I apologize. I am not, for whatever reason, if there are hands being raised, I'm not seeing them. I saw them earlier though, so I don't know what that's about. When I was on my phone, I saw them, but now I don't seem to see them. I don't know what that's about or why. But Mr. Latham, I do believe. Oh, I do see Chuck's hand up, Dr. Moulton. So okay,
Yeah,
that is working.
Just a quick point of information. I followed the link to the agenda, which links to proposals. Followed the link to proposal P. It seems to be labeled at the top 7th substitute. Is my understanding correct that this is not the correct link, that we have an 8th substitute, or did the 7 just not switch to 8? I want to make sure I'm following the right thing here. This is a question, I guess, for Mr. Latham or for the chair.
I was just going to say, I was going to actually ask Mr. Latham, because I honestly, with the revisions and whatnot, I look at it as this is just a move to amend by a substitute, basically, right? And if there's no objection to it, then we just move on and we make that the main motion. I don't know that there's been a motion made to that effect, but I assumed that that was coming and assumed that that's what would be the first thing today. Just because, we had a motion on the floor when we adjourned, it was worded a certain way, and that's been worked on. Go ahead, Ms. Serwin, Madam Secretary.
According to my notes, we were talking at the last meeting about 7, but since that time, 8 has come out. The
Right.
8th version.
Yes. And if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I actually don't share things very often these days. The 7th version would be what was on the floor currently, right? Because that was what we left off with. So bringing that business back,
Yes.
and then I believe it would be Mr. Latham's intent to immediately move to amend by substitution his 8th proposal for the 7th. Would that be correct as far as a point of order? As far as in Roberts doing that, that would be the right way to do that?
That is the proper procedure, and I see Mr. Latham has a thumbs up in his square.
Yes. And I'm going to also take that as Mr. Latham is raising his hand to make a motion.
Okay.
Mr. Latham.
Well, no, but so moved.
Okay. So that's going to be amendment by substitution. So then the question is there any objection to amending by substitution what we worked on last time, the 7th edition proposal with the 8th revision? Is there objection to that? Not hearing any objection. For those that don't know, I did see that the 8th revision was circulated in email. I don't remember the exact date. It was in the past few days. Mr. Latham, you have the floor. Actually, go ahead. Yes.
I literally circulated it, and Ms. Harlos made a comment in the chat that less than an hour before this meeting started. And so, in fairness, both to our committee chair and maybe other members, if they do feel, and by the way, I did circulate a comparison version, so people should be able to see, what changes are different between the 7th and the 8th substitute. That was in the email that was sent out. However, if people feel like they need more time to get up to speed, I don't know that they were terribly substantive. I mean, we can kind of go through what changes were made in the comparison version. Maybe it's appropriate to move to the next item, or I'll defer to the will of the committee. But I recognize that the updated version only was put out fairly recently, like again this afternoon. It's not even 2 hours old.
So, Mr. Latham, I appreciate the offer to move to a different piece of business and come back to this. I think my concern with that is that when we made the motion to keep this meeting, right, there was a motion to not have this meeting. Part of the discussion and part of the understanding is that we wouldn't like go wild and get off into other items, that we were going to try to stay roughly where we are, that, and I even remember making the comment that we would probably only get through this if we got through this tonight. So I'd like to stay here if we can. If the body needs a moment to look through their email to find the proposal to read it, I'm happy to you know, grant a recess. I just don't want us to go wild and violate the spirit of why we continue to have this meeting tonight, and not, you know, it was the members' understanding when they voted to keep this meeting that we would be working on this. That's all. I see Mr. Martin had his hand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Molman. I'm not sure of the correct procedure for doing this, but I'd like to request that version 8 here be read aloud.
I believe that is your right to ask for that. Before we do that, I see that Dr. Moulton also has his hand up. And then if there's nothing else, then Mr. Latham, would you be willing to read the proposal? I don't know how long it is. I apologize. I didn't read it because I knew I'd be chairing. So is it very lengthy? Is it reasonable? Or
I'm just looking at what Microsoft Word tells me. It's 5 pages long, says 2,315 words. So it might, you know, 3 columns. It might take a bit, but you know, I could make a go at it.
I'm only requesting that the third column, the right hand column, be read.
Well, and Mr. Martin, do you really want me actually to go with the middle column where the proposed amendments are? Because I think you would want to know the changes, right?
Mr. Latham, you did email this to the list, correct?
Yes.
I would, instead of story time, I would like to suggest that perhaps after answering Mr. Moulton's got his hand up, Mr. Bracco has his hand up. Let me hear from Dr. Moulton first.
Somebody could share a screen.
And then I was thinking that we could share a screen, but it may also be better for people to actually read it at their own pace as well. And I was thinking about that, just because I know in the past I have gotten lost at times because things were moving too fast or too slow, and I got distracted. Either way. Dr. Moulton.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I followed the link that Karen M put in the chat. I looked at the comparison of the 7th versus the 8th, and I looked at the 8th. They look fine to me. I've read them. I don't need them read to me, but I have no objection if someone else wants them read. So I'm good to vote on this, and I'm in favor of the substitute. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moulton. Mr. Bracco.
If you would like, I can share my screen. I have it downloaded.
That is fine by me. I don't know who's allowed. Let me see what's going on here. Okay, yes, you can share your screen, it appears. And members of the committee as well, if you'd like. Oh, hang on. I'm going to need readers for that. Members of the committee, you have this, and anybody following the list has this also in their email, and it may be easier for them to, like I said, some people, myself included, I read better than I hear. So for me, the reading is more important than the hearing, but that's not to say that that's everyone. And I do, Mr. Martin did ask for it to be read. And I do believe that is his right to ask that as a member of the committee. So unless Mr. Martin is otherwise wants something else, I think
I will. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I will waive my request to have
Okay. That's not a problem. Appreciate that. Thank you. I don't want to step on your rights either, sir. I just want to make sure that we are accommodating everyone on the committee. This is important. Okay. That's easy. Yep. The vote to authorize electronic balloting. Mr. Bracco, can you hold for just a moment there? Sorry. I'm actually reading it, and that was a little bit fast for me. So you're right. You're fine right there. That's good. At least for me. This language seems familiar. Okay. I'm ready to move forward if no one else objects.
I have my hand
Anything left?
raised, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if
Oh,
Mr.
I'm so
Seebeck
sorry.
had his before me.
Okay, and I literally can't see those now with the screen sharing on. Let me see how I could figure that out.
I had to do on my computer, I went to the view, I exited out, and then I reopened it, and it brought it back in the format I had. Yeah, every time somebody shares a screen, I think it dominates your screen until the user does their own thing.
Well,
But
if we don't mind, Mr. Seebeck hasn't. I was going to say Mr. Seebeck hasn't spoken yet. If that's okay.
Can I actually? The reason I wanted to raise my hand, I was wondering if Mr. Bracco would also now show the comparison, so people could actually see the changes between this 8th substitute and the 7th substitute, because that might help people zero in on the changes that were made.
Okay.
You'll have to get me to download it then.
Well, let's finish looking. I was going to say let's finish looking through this one first, since we're hopefully about.
Yeah, I agree. I thought we'd finished, but.
Or was that the end, Mr. Bracco?
There might have been a tiny bit more. It's just in Rule 7 where the proposal is to strike the language that the vice president process is the same as the president process. And if you want me to explain why, just as you recall, we wanted to do the traditional process, or the idea was to use the traditional process of, multi-rounds for the president, and then use electronic voting for the vice president to show how much quicker it could be.
Yeah. Okay. Yep, there's that straight through. Great. Thank you, Mr. Bracco. And if you wouldn't mind grabbing that other version, and then Mr. Seebeck had his hand up, and thank you for being patient, Mr. Seebeck.
Yeah, can I go back up to Rule 1, please, for a moment?
And sorry to jump in here, and Mr. Bracco, you may need to do this. I don't know if you can adjust the review tab and to make the changes more visible, because it depends on the version you use. It makes the changes more visible than others.
So I think in Rule 1, what's being done here is simply adding a third item, or item number 3 to the agenda. So instead of going credentials to adoption of agenda, it would go credentials to a vote on authorizing electronic balloting, and then to agenda. And that none of the other order, nothing else has changed. Only that adding that one thing where the convention would vote whether or not to use electronic balloting. That's how I'm reading it, and if that's not correct, please let me know. But
I do have a question about all this, though.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is a proposed amendment of the convention rules, correct?
Yes.
Okay, let's say this goes into our report with a convention. We call to order. We go through the Credentials Committee report, adopt the agenda of the Treasury report. Then we go to the Audit Committee. Then the bylaws comes up, and this comes up, and we pass it. Do we then go back to item number 3 to authorize electronic balloting, or do we have to amend the order of suspend the rules for the order of business to go back and do that? I think we're getting. Is there a proviso to handle this, to handle that insertion behind the Bylaws Committee in the agenda in order of business to handle this?
So the proviso has been highlighted here at the bottom, that it takes effect upon the final adjournment of the convention at which this is adopted. And I think that makes sense. I'm sorry, that would get into debate. I'm not going to say anything. There is a proviso.
So it would be for the next convention, though. It would go for the next convention. Okay, that answers my question.
That's
Thank
the
you.
intent. Yeah, this wouldn't kick in until 2026.
Okay, I didn't see that. Thank you.
Can I just throw out, I was hoping that whoever's in charge of the document there, go see where in that simple markup, show markup, drop the show markup menu. Ooh, I think you did it. I think you showed where the changes are. Yeah, because see what we're looking at right now. See, for example, where voting now has a strike through and it's replaced by balloting. So that shows the changes, the differences between the 7th and the 8th substitute. So we may want to go from the top and just show.
Yeah, let's,
those.
Mr. Brecker, if you don't mind, let's start at the top, and we're looking at this third column now, just for anyone who's maybe confused what we're doing here. The third column now should be showing us.
Well, the second and the third, and maybe even the first.
Okay.
Because remember, in the 7th version, we didn't even touch Rule 1, the order of business. So this new piece of Rule 1 is new.
Yeah, I don't think the markup's working quite right. It was working well in one part, but not in this part. So.
Well, I think, and just noticed we moved from, I think we were using voting procedure and change it to election balloting procedure.
For Rule 1, everyone understands that what's changing in Rule 1 is we're inserting an item in the standing convention agenda, a new third item. Nobody's confused by that? You are, say so. Otherwise, we're going to move on. Let's move on.
Mr. Sivak has his hand up.
Oh, Mr. Sivak, is that a artifact, or do you have a new question?
Took it down.
Okay, artifact. All right.
Oh, we lost the little markup. There we go. It's back.
So, all right.
If I can just comment, that was a straggler from the 7th version that I had meant to remove, but now it's gone. The not using the single transferable vote method.
Yes, okay, that makes sense. And just for clarification, that's because we're going to make that a separate item to consider, right? The single transferable.
That's my understanding, yes.
Perfect. Mr. Brecker, if you could pause right here, please. There's a lot of changes going on here.
Yeah, this is, and I want people to be thinking of, especially our more parliamentary minded folks. The request by our chair was to swap out balloting for voting when possible. And I went through that best I could. There were some where it just didn't seem or feel right. So if, again, anyone wants to weigh in on that, I'm open to it, but it was kind of a judgment call as to when to use ballot and when to use voting. or ballot or vote.
Is everyone okay with this page to move on? And if you're not, just let you know. It's probably faster to unmute and chime in, but I'm trying to watch the thumbs up, thumbs down, hands up, hands down too. So at any point someone needs a moment, just say so, please.
And maybe here I do want to just mention, so in this new, I don't know what the number is there. I know I said it in the email. Is it A2? And in the prior version, we use just electronic ballot, which generates a physical ballot. I took that out as an alternative, just again to draw a greater distinction between the method that I was proposing and the method that the chair is proposing. So this language contemplates both, and then maybe if we want to even but I just said, we could just do it straight electronic, and it's not going to generate a physical ballot. Although again, I'm open to it generating a physical ballot. And then that second version, in which the delegate basically casts a physical ballot, but then they contemporaneously complete some kind of electronic something. And I use the term cast vote record because I know that's a term of art in election administration. I don't think that cast vote record is used in election administration the way I'm using it here. So we could come up with something. I did suggest before the meeting started. I know our committee chair didn't like the term cast vote record. And so I'll just throw out, I suggested the delegate's contemporaneous completion of an electronic vote, or voting affidavit, ballot journal, ballot diary, just to stimulate our thinking on what kind of wording might be optimal there.
At the very top of column 3. Oh yeah, it says it there. A delegate. Okay, I found it in column 2 as well. They must be physically present to cast a ballot. Okay.
What was Secretary Harlow's suggestion for an alternative to cast vote record?
I did not see one. I just saw the email that did not like cast vote record. It's in the group chat. I think just it's unwieldy, wordy, and I didn't know if she was aware that it's a term of art in election administration. Although I would suggest that she might be, because she's into this ranked choice voting, electoral reform stuff like I am.
She has an email of an hour ago saying that her substitute is at the bottom of the one linked, and I'd like it considered. That's what it says.
Yeah.
So she submitted a substitute somewhere.
Yeah, no, and just for what it's worth, I looked at that, and that's why I suggested that language before our meeting started as an alternative, because I think her original language in there is contemporaneous manual ballot. And I know at the end of one of our meetings, somebody was like, that's kind of awkward. So I think we're just kind of playing with that language. And then I've used physical ballot on a couple of occasions here. And then just, my most recent suggestion was strike cast vote record. And I think we would, perhaps place it with, let's see, a delegate's contemporaneous completion of an electronic vote. And this gets into the, trying to distinguish between a vote and a ballot. And I didn't want to have two things called a ballot, because then we might have dueling ballots. And that could be problematic if there's some dispute over, which is the right one. I think this proposal defaults to the physical ballot, but this just makes hopefully a conflict between the two interpretations less likely, is my intent.
Yes, I'd like to request that Secretary Harlow's suggested substitute be shared on the screen.
Okay, right now, that's fine, okay. Is there only suggested substitute related to that one?
It's my recollection is it's a little more global. I think, Paul, you'd have to click, the link, and then hers is at the very bottom. I think, nope, higher. Nope, go up to number 2. Yeah, click on that link and then just that bylaws P. Yeah, click on that and then just scroll down to the end. And just, if I may, a lot of that language is the same. I think the big difference right now is so 7A, contemporaneous manual ballots are completed and turned into each delegation chair. That should be in place into a sealed envelope. So that was, I think, just her preferred iteration of that. So when I use when I talk about contemporaneous manual ballots.
That doesn't look like a substitute for what we were considering.
I think she was just hoping that we consider this proposed language in light of discussing the bigger one.
Well, all right.
So
I guess I was under
what
the
we're talking about
a specific alternative to the cast vote record language, but I don't see that.
No, I think you're right, but I think the closest version is of what she had proposed in the past. I don't think her suggestion, please consider, her comments, was specific to the cast vote record thing. I think it was just a global concept. But the last language I saw that she proposed was contemporaneous manual ballots. We have, Mr. Chair, we have Mr. Bracco and Mr. Roulette with hands raised.
Oh, thank you. And I apologize. I did not see who raised it first, but we've heard from Mr. Bracco, so I'm going to call Mr. Roulette. Roulette? Unmuted. We don't hear him.
I did see him get unmuted, but he still has his hands up and I can't hear Tom.
All right. Well, Mr. Roulette, we can't hear you speak. I'm going to go to Mr. Bracco, and then we'll try to come back to you, sir. Mr. Bracco.
So I think I would certainly like to run through the scenarios, because I think, like, understanding the process, at least for me, it seems to be more important than little nitpicking the language. Like, I think that's what I would like to see, and I don't know that that's all that clear just looking at the language. Maybe if somebody who's more knowledgeable of this could give an example of, all right, let's assume that this was approved, now what?
Right.
And I'll just say I can
yeah,
give
please.
it a go. And are we talking, of course, about which version? Because if we look what's on the screen, that A1 and A2, they're slightly different variants. So just A1, the way that might be contemplated is that, the delegate is maybe going to download an app. Maybe it's a convention app that has a voting module in it. And when it's appropriate to do so, they announce, okay, we're going to vote. And then, the person votes on their device and that's it. So that's one way. That's one way how it would play out. And then, of course, that data gets transferred to the teller team, and it generates a report, as you can look in at by B. And that system, by the way, allows write-in votes, so they could do that through this app, and then go from there. Now, I am noticing a disparity when I removed from A1, the electronic ballot would generate a physical ballot. Then what are we going to do about D? Because now we're saying, there's going to be no physical ballot in that scenario. So maybe we need to go back in and import that the electronic ballot will, well, we could do it two ways. We could say that electronic ballot is going to generate a physical ballot, or if a recount is successfully ordered, the recount must be done using the physical ballots collected by delegation chairs, if we use that second process. So now let's go to the second process, this A2. So the vote by a physical ballot accompanied by a delegate's contemporaneous completion of an electronic vote, I'm going to say, rather than cast vote record, but right now we have it as cast vote record. So the delegate, we still have this electronic voting system, but the delegate's going to actually complete a physical ballot. But at the same time, they're going to, do the electronic vote as well. Hopefully they'll be the same. My concern is that because of human error or whatever, they might not be the same, but the physical ballot is going to be the one that's going to control the ultimate result. But then, so the delegate completes both, they submit, and then if you look at the next language, the ballot the delegate gives to their respective delegation chair for placement into a designated, envelope. And by the way, that's again, maybe I got over ambitious in taking the physical ballot part out of one. We could go back to the prior version and put that language back in if we wanted to, or we could just bring that language up into that sub 2, and just that scenario is only going to apply when we're going to print out or use a physical ballot. Then, as you can see, the ballot, goes to the delegation chair. They put it in an envelope. Then I think elsewhere in our rules, that envelope then goes to the secretary's tellers, and they count the election. And again, my concern there is the official, election, because it's going to rely on the physical ballots, is going to still need to be, hand counted. But because we're asking delegates to contemporaneously complete an electronic vote, then we may be able to still realize, they could announce that we have this electronic result. However, we need to, maybe verify that through the hand counting process. That's, I guess, the alternative you have there. So I think that's how I understand the process plays out. But logistically, I think with that second one, you've got a problem, especially, we all know how long it takes to hand count results. What are we going to, if we're doing a series of officer elections and we get maybe a preview vote, then how might that affect subsequent officer elections? And that's a logistical issue I see happening. Maybe that just means we, work around that. But that's one problem. So anyway, I'm open to more questions, but I hope that's my initial run through the process.
I have Mr. Bracco, and then I'm putting myself in behind Mr. Bracco. Mr. Bracco.
So in this, I'm just going to highlight it. So this section after 2, as it's currently written, are you saying that it would also apply to 1?
As it's currently written, yes, and which means it's not going to work. So we need to put the old language back in, or just bring up that language you just highlighted and just put it on the end of 2.
So I'd like to have a point of parliamentary inquiry. Have we already moved to substitute like remove version 7 and insert version 8? Like, is version 8 the main motion at this point, or is it still a substitute at this point?
It is I believe it is the main motion at this point.
Okay.
At the beginning, I asked if there was objection to substitution. There was not. And so that made the motion on the floor.
Can I just jump in, by the way? Mr. Roulette has a thing in the chat saying that he was going to defer and shift his vote to the next alternate in line.
All right.
Madam Secretary, who is
Dean
that?
Rogers.
Rogers? Great, thank you.
Right. At this point, I have Moulton replacing Rufo and Roots replacing Harlos. And now we'll have Rogers replacing Rowlett.
Okay.
I know Mr. Roulette was having audio problems. So, Mr. Roulette, if you have something, that another member could relay on your behalf, we're not trying to cut you out just because of a technical issue. Mr. Bracco, were you finished or did you have more?
So I would actually like to move that this section, like, here, I'll try to do the way that, that was not working. That did not work at all. There. So,
I see what you're saying.
yeah. So, and then this would be gone.
Right there. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's Control Shift. Oh, this word. I don't know what it is.
Or I guess it's, strike that semicolon. I don't think you need it. But that.
Maybe a comma instead of the semicolon.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, that is the motion. And so Mr. Brecker, would you like to speak to your motion?
Sure. So this provision down here says that the delegate gives to the respective delegation chair for placement into an envelope. As it's written, if that applies to an electronic ballot, that's just not possible. So I think that this provision can only apply to option 2. And so I think that we should put it within option 2, because otherwise we might be making this whole thing impossible to do through option 1.
And Mr. Latham, I see you have your hand up. You're
I just want to say,
I presume.
Yeah, I support that change. And I know you wanted to speak, Mr. Chair.
I want to speak on the main when we get out of this amendment, so it's no problem. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. Any further discussion on this amendment? Motion to amend. Not seeing any hands go up. Is there any? Let's just do it this way. Is there any objection to this amendment? Any objection? Not seeing any hands or hearing anyone object. So I'm going to say that passes, and we are now back to the main motion. All right. What I wanted to ask was specific to the intent of this process. Now, is the intent to when we are using electronic voting that a delegate will be casting electronic ballot and a paper ballot at the same time, that they're doing both of those things and they're handing in the paper ballots, but they've also cast electronic? Is that the intent?
And again, this is Ms. Harlow's proposal, but that's the way I read the language. I wish she was here to explain it more, but I believe that's the intention. Yes.
But in your language, that's not the intent. The intent is electronic or a physical ballot, one or the other.
Right. And I'm open to both, but right now I'm just saying electronic ballot. We could go with just an electronic ballot and that's it, rather than kind of a dual system there. But I'm open to a version where, yeah, I'm open to a version that was in the prior substitute where the electronic ballot would, spit out, you'd need a printer, something physical that could then be counted by the teller team.
Well, I'm going to just note, and I'm not trying to engage in debate here. I'm just trying to think about logically the fastest path to an accurate result. My personal thought is that if electronic happens, that you would want to have the ability to print out the ballots, but not kill a small rainforest every time.
Right.
That it's an option if necessary, but not required. That's just my gut and how I feel that would kind of move things along. But I do believe that everything we've done here is better than what we do. And, that's not going to be the hill I die upon. So, Mr. Bracco.
So I don't believe that there is any pending substitute. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Bracco. We are back on the main motion.
Then I would like to propose, I don't know, I guess if I'm reading it correctly, Madam Chair proposed that, because I don't know, the sevens are throwing me, that this stuff, it appears to sort of be an alternative to this and not necessarily the entire proposal. So I'm not sure whether it would qualify as a substitute or whether it would qualify as an amendment, because it's amending a lot of the main motion. I'm just not sure if it's enough to qualify as a substitute.
I think it would be an amendment. You would be striking the proposed 6 and replacing it with what is numbered as 7 in the alternate, but it would obviously be 6 when it comes back. I think this as
well. The 8.
Oh yes, and sneaky 8 there. Yes, sorry. And I do believe that is the intent. Mr. Latham, did you have additional information?
Well, I would ask people to compare that for the Ms. Harlow's version and what's in the I guess 8th substitute as amended we're looking at now. A lot of the same stuff is there. That electronic, balloting may be used. You'll see that in the 6, the 7 and 6. The 7A contemporaneous manual ballots, that's kind of now in our 6A2. The report is generated, votes by state delegation. That 7B in the proposal, that's now in the 6B, worded a little different. So people might want to look to see if it's, meaningfully different. The 7C in the alternative is captured in 6C on write-ins. We scroll down a little bit. We do got to work on that. I think we do. In fact, I'm kind of trying to work on amendment on the side, but the physical ballots, that's only going to apply now to a vote that's conducted under 6A2. So I think we got to put language in there if a recount of a vote conducted pursuant to 6A2 is successfully ordered. I think that's how you fix that. The recount and our committee chair in the last meeting talked about, and this was in response to your question, Paul, why do we, have a problem with doing a recount with an electronic vote? Well, the concern is if it's something funky is going on there, if it's rigged in some way or compromised in some way, you're just rerunning the compromised data. And we talked about open source and ways to protect against that. But the recount on electronic ballot, you just kind of rerun the data, and that's your recount. So I don't know that you wouldn't need the physical ballots in that 8. So I just think if we're rolling with the language that we've got right now, we would just want to make sure that recount using the physical ballots only applies to that 7A or 6A2 version.
So,
Mr. Bracco, your hand is still up. Go ahead.
yes. I think that we should sort of put these two versions of this rule, or rules, I guess, for this one. I think we should put them head to head, and hopefully iron sharpens iron here. So I'd like to move that we amend the proposal to replace this section, the electronic balloting, all that stuff, with this. And I'll just... Oh,
And obviously
that didn't
numbered
work.
appropriately.
Yeah. Let's see if I can make Word do very... Oh, no, not doing very Word-like things. It's making a mess of it. All right, I'm just gonna forget about the spacing. There. So now we can have one, and hopefully that's easier. So, if you'll allow me to speak to this
sorry,
for a moment.
I was just going to say, Mr. Bracco has made a motion to amend, striking the current 6 and replacing with a renumbered, or appropriately numbered, but the substance of what is in purple. Mr. Bracco.
So, being honest, I think that I like Mr. Latham's procedure better. However, the language is very wordy in my eyes. I think that having language that's that wordy is, regardless of what the procedure is going to be a turnoff to delegates. We're asking them to do something that very paranoid people would object to sort of on its surface, and then making them read complicated wording to try to untangle it. Because I think we also, in this committee, having looked at this for at least in the last meeting, and I think maybe some of the previous meeting as well, we're still trying to untangle that process a bit. It's not coming through clearly in the language. So I don't know if there's a good way to do this, but I would prefer, my ideal would be to include a provision that allows this within this language. And I just want to try to sort of give us the opportunity to do that with this amendment proposal.
Just as parliamentary inquiry or whatever, can you quickly select the two amendments and do a quick word count on both? I think that Word can do that, right? I'm just curious, because you mentioned it's wordy, and I'm wondering how much of it's formatting versus words, that's all.
That the proposal, the amendment, according to Word, 126 words, and the original 163.
About 40 more words, or 33% more. Okay, thank you. Mr. Latham, you have your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, I would just, while we're looking at this, can we, my motion would be to just amend this amendment. Let's change, see that 7A where it says delegation hair, let's change that to delegation chair.
Oh, yeah, that's a typo, obviously. I don't think we need a motion for that. Obviously, the intent was, there's no such thing as a delegation hair. So,
well, there is, but we
yeah.
usually don't talk about it.
There is.
Oh, you know.
Ask Alex Merced.
Nice.
And then actually, just if I,
Mr. Brecco, can you add the letter C there for us? Just a, yeah.
There we go.
No one objects to that, right? That's an obvious typo.
Okay, but let me
As
go
long as
from
nobody
the
objects.
top. So remember electronic voting, so electronic balloting. So we'd want to make that switch. I mean, I guess this would be my proposed amendments. And then if we're ready on 7A contemporaneous, I want to change manual to physical. And then at the end of that sentence, strike the word vote. We've just been using tellers in other proposals. And then scroll down if you would, just to see where we're. I guess on 7C, would we want to change voting to balloting? And then maybe let's tackle that first, but where I'm kind of contemplating the insertion of the electronic balloting part is we do a 7A1 and a 7A2. And then we change that 8 so that the recounts would just be for the 7A, whichever one gets the 1 or the 2, the physical ballots. So, but let's maybe move those amendments unless anyone else has any. Well, let's move those amendments.
Okay, so you're making a motion to amend the amendment, striking the word voting to become balloting, striking the word manual to become physical, striking the word vote from the vote tellers, striking voting, replacing with balloting, and that's it for the moment. That is your motion.
Yes.
Do you need to speak to that any further?
No, I don't believe so.
We'll try this. Is there objection? And you can object either vocal or raising hands. I'm watching both. Is there objection to this amendment to the amendment? Not seeing any hands, and I'm not hearing any voices. One more time. Any objection? Not hearing an objection, so I'm going to rule that passes. Okay, so now we're back to the amendment. And Mr. Latham, I see you have your hand up. Is that new or is that an artifact?
That's new. And Paul, I guess I'm wondering if you can put this language into the chat so I can copy it into a document so we can all play with it a little bit. Because what I'm struggling with the 7A now, because for example, be looking at 7A. So yeah, it says electronic balloting. Where's the part where we don't do contemporaneous physical ballots? I guess we could just create a A1 and a A2. And anyway, that's just what I'm puzzling over right now as I try to give us that option for electronic balloting only without doing the contemporaneous physical ballot. But maybe other people have a suggestion.
Yeah, I was just going to note that you asked where it is. It does not currently exist as I read it. Mr. Brecker, while some other folks are pondering that, would you mind scrolling up a little bit? I want to see if there's still a provision in here about requiring the convention to approve anywhere.
I believe I put it in, and you might need to look at the comparison version, but there it is.
I'm not sure that it exists within the amendment.
Yeah, it's not within the amendment, but it's after that publication at least 90 days prior. So right there, I just added comma and following the convention's approval. And as I put in that email, I didn't know if we wanted to do convention's approval as specified in the order of business. I thought that might be too limiting for us. Maybe it would come outside of the order of business, or just be too confusing or whatnot. So, but that was my suggestion on how to do that.
Mr. Bracken?
So I think that's probably worth including. So I'd like to make the following amendment. Just steal that. Now, that.
Read this here. Lecture about anyways, the main tabulation for state tabulation.
We just read through this.
Real quick, while we're making this motion, just to avoid one coming up, or another one, or try to. The word "the convention," the use of the word "the" rather than perhaps using the word "that convention." The only reason I ask is somebody somewhere is going to. I'm concerned somebody somewhere is going to be like, "Oh, we authorized this last convention. We don't need to do this again." Whereas if you use the word "that convention," it means that specific convention. I don't care. That's just how I read it personally. I'm okay with this as long as we don't think that the convention is going to get abused. It's your motion, Mr. Brecko. I don't mean to stomp on your. Just consider. It was just something to throw in there to consider while we're here.
Okay. Apologies. This is really messy and on the fly.
Yeah. And I hope the other committee members are both watching and considering what other motions they'd like to make to try to perfect this. So.
I don't know if we're just spitballing here right now. It just doesn't seem to flow language-wise.
Mhm.
I know what you're trying to do. We're just trying to limit it to each convention. I want to say each convention, but or going back to that rule 1 at the outset of each convention. Although again, outset we might have a scenario where we want to do it in the middle.
Right. So real quick on that, my thought on that was we have an agenda item, and at that point, I think it's just a majority vote, right? To yes or no, up or down.
Right.
In order to go back to it, let's say somewhere along the way, somebody's like, you know what, we really should have done that electronic voting after all. This is horrible, all this collection of ballots. It'd be a motion to suspend the rules, right? To reconsider, right? We could just go back. And at that point, it takes 2/3. But, it's not closed. The door's not completely closed on it if the convention body suddenly has massive buyer's remorse after the fact. Mm-hmm. So.
But must be approved? I mean, why do we need must be? Can it be and if approved by that convention? I guess the instant convention? The pending convention? The current convention?
Mr. Brecko, you have your hand raised to speak again. Are you waiting for us to shut up and me to call on you?
What about our parliamentary folks?
Nope,
Mr. JJ's here. Sylvia's here.
I was actually going to ask that. In fact, I was trying to get through the chat to, not the chat, the participant list to see who's here. Yeah, I mean, Mr. Arrowood, you're a member of the committee. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask your opinion first, just because you're a member of the committee. And I see Mr. Jacobs is here, and I do not see Mr. Brown any longer. But Mr. Arrowood, do you have any thoughts?
I'm going to make a bad joke and say it's too bad we don't have video because maybe she's nodded off.
Wow.
It
is exciting arguing over this, that, and the.
I heard JJ.
It is extra exciting.
I heard JJ pipe up for a second. He unmuted and then remuted.
And that's fine.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs, if you don't mind.
Would you please state the question?
I think what we're looking for is an opinion on the best way to make sure that a vote to allow electronic balloting only applies to the current convention, that one convention can't approve it for future conventions going forward. Correct me if I'm wrong there, guys, but I think that's what we're trying to do here, right?
Yes. And I don't know if you are able to see our screen, but we're looking at this green language in 7.
Don't the rules have to be adopted at each convention individually anyway?
Well, actually, so that was a question in the chat, but I believe the answer is no, because we have these standing rules, right? And so I don't think we've ever had just a vote at the outset of each convention to approve the rules. We've just kind of rolled with it until they're changed. I could be wrong, but I think that's the way we've done it.
Mr. Chairman,
Please, Mr. Jacobs.
I believe Mr. Latham is correct on that last item, that there are basically a permanent set of rules.
Yes.
Yes, let me take a look at this language, if I may. See.
While you're looking at that, I just want to quickly note that in the past there has been a whole lot that has operated through what is best classified as tradition, based upon some ruling of some chair 3, 4, 5 conventions ago, that then just becomes part of our process and never gets codified anywhere. So, go ahead, Mr. Jacobs. I just want to mention that just because we wanted it away.
I believe this is codified, if I recall correctly. How about changing this to each convention?
I see Mr. Martin. I see your hand up there. I'm going to call on you next.
That would be my suggestion, I think, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's perfect. And Mr. Bracco, this is your amendment, so you are obviously entitled to put whatever you want there. Mr. Martin.
Yeah, it's in the order of business above for each convention to approve electronic balloting or not. So it's in the order of business for each convention whether they want to do it or do electronic balloting, or they want to not do it.
Okay. Mr. Bracco.
So would we have to amend it to make it each, or just do it? I think I don't know.
Mr. Bracco, I have not heard you actually make a motion yet.
Okay,
so
then.
I believe we're working on the words to make a motion. And it's your motion. You can do whatever you want with it. So, just to reiterate. Do you have anything else, Mr. Bracco? This moment, because Mr. Latham is in line behind you.
No.
Okay, Mr. Latham.
What about replacing that must be with if? That would be my motion. Just I think it achieves the same thing and it's shorter. Or no?
There's no motion on the floor. No motion.
Oh, there's no
making
motion.
Suggestions.
Oh,
no motion.
Okay, so
we're trying to word a motion. Is what we're doing here.
Replace if
Point of
replace
inquiry,
must be.
isn't this proposal been moved and we're working to amend it? So there would be a motion on the floor.
Well,
I'm sorry. Yes, there is. Yeah, the green has not yet been moved. You are correct, Mr. Seebeck.
I'm referring to the blue.
Sorry.
Or the purple, you mean?
Oh yes, the purple.
I see.
The purple is the amendment.
Yeah.
The purple is the main amendment, and then they're working on a secondary amendment to the purple.
Okay, but I'm throwing out maybe to the. I'm throwing out to the wordsmith here. Is he wedded to must be, or would if work?
I think maybe I should just rethink this whole thing here. How about this? If,
and I'll say yes. And Mr. Jacobs is asking in the chat if his hand is up, and it is up.
It is. I'm sorry, Mr. Jacobs. Yes, I did see your hand go up. I do want who may have had an objection or a point of order or something. It may have been cut off. Mr. Seebeck, did you have something else?
This is the blue is the main motion, right?
The blue is the main motion, 7 is the motion to amend, and then the green is an attempt at a motion to amend the amendment.
Got it.
Mr. Jacobs, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, no problem.
Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You can hear me?
We can hear you. Yes.
Yes.
Very good. Very good. I just wanted to point out, as I'm sure Ms. Harlos would if she were here, that the order of business can be suspended. So putting something in there would not be the same as making it a rule of this type.
Okay. And only because my brain breaks on this stuff, what's being written here currently would not be considered in the nature of a rule of order. Is that correct, Mr. Jacobs?
It would be technically a rule in the nature of a rule of order, but you could not suspend it in advance for the next convention. The only thing that you could do technically would be, if adopted, would be to suspend it and prevent electronic voting from taking place. If that makes sense.
I believe it does. I hope that helped the committee because I think it helped me understand what's going on here. I see Mr. Bracco and Mr. Latham have their hands up. I think Mr. Bracco was first.
So since we've kind of been dancing around this amendment to the amendment, I guess I'd like to officially make this motion to add the green and then just strike that to make it lowercase.
Yeah. Okay.
I think this is just
Mr.
simpler than
Bracco,
what we were doing before.
Mr. Bracco, you've made that motion and you just said it's simpler than what we were doing before. Do you need to speak to this further?
Well, I think for the reason that JJ just spoke to, we have to have something in here to say, like, basically the default is you can't use electronic voting. But if you approve it, and because we're sort of putting all this in here, you wouldn't have to suspend the rules and it takes 2/3. I think it would just take the majority. Then I would just be more comfortable having some kind of, even if it's belt and suspenders, that you have to approve it first, no matter what. There's no let's jump straight to electronic balloting.
Mr. Latham, you have your hand up. Are you speaking on this amendment? Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Latham, if you want to speak. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I like this proposed amendment just because it's short and clean. However, I took JJ's comment a different way, that we need to actually bulk it up a little bit. So if approved, well, approved by whom? I guess the default assumption is the convention delegates, but are we sure? And then kind of when approved. Because we have the order of business, but it seems like we ought to refer to that in some way, just now as short as it is. So it seems like we need to add more detail, but maybe I'm throwing it out there again to Ms. Arrowwood and others if we need to be a little more specific there. And yeah, there's something in the chat about, if approved, we talked about limiting it to just one convention, right? So where's our limit there? Because the order of business, according to what I heard from JJ, isn't going to be enough.
Okay. I do see Mr. Jacobs has his hand up. I was just going to note very quickly, because I was going to put myself in right after here, and then I'll get to Mr. Jacobs. This language, I don't think precludes what you're speaking of, Mr. Latham, and so I would suggest that the amendment is an improvement towards what you're going toward, that we can pass this and then come back and add the additional language. I don't think this is going to preclude addressing your concerns.
Okay. No,
Mr.
point well
Jacobs.
taken.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for permitting me to speak. I did want to assure Mr. Latham that this would be could only be adopted by the delegates. These rules can only be changed, adopted, modified, however you want to phrase it, by the delegates. So that would not be an issue. I also would not suggest that this was a belt and suspenders approach. Putting this into the agenda or putting this into the order of business sets a time for it to be considered. That time could be modified by suspending the rules and taking something out of order. There's also, you can lay something on the table and go through that, and that would be another way to do it. But this would set something here that says very specifically, no, you can't move this stuff around, you have to do this first before you do it. So I think that it would be sufficient, at least in my opinion, to accomplish what I think everybody, from what I'm hearing, wishes to accomplish. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Oops, I had to let somebody in. So, all right, I see hands up. Mr. Bracco.
So, point of parliamentary inquiry. The way that the existing order of business is phrased, and maybe it'd be good, I will scroll up to that so we can see it. The way that this is phrased is that this would be a majority vote, correct? And then to suspend the rules to move this around would be a 2/3 vote. Is that also correct?
Unless one of the parliamentarians wants to overrule me, that is how I would have ruled it, yes. Would have been a motion to suspend the rules to amend the agenda or to reconsider or something, but it would require a motion to suspend the rules. I see Mr. Jacobs has his hand up. If there's no objection, Mr. Jacobs.
I may be permitted to answer. Yes and no. I love giving these answers. It would take a 2/3 vote to suspend the rules and take the item out of order. However, you could also do something such as table these various reports when pending and get to this, change the order around that way. That only takes a majority vote, and that is perfectly in order.
That is a point well taken, that you can always lay something on the table and then pick it back up. Yes. So, okay. Mr. Bracco.
So I guess my thought on that is if you have the majority vote to lay stuff on the table to basically avoid approving the electronic voting, if some voting bloc had that support, wouldn't they just be able to vote electronic balloting down when it comes up in the standard agenda? I guess that's kind of my thought here is if you can approve it by majority, you can disallow it by majority as well.
So I have a thought on that. If there was a group that was large enough that was intentionally playing games in order to, for instance, not authorize electronic balloting in particular races or particular items, where they could shift the schedule around, the agenda around through tabling and whatnot, things that only require a majority, that in theory they could make it that, for instance, the chair's race is paper ballots but the vice chair and on is electronic, because it hasn't been authorized yet. That somebody would make a motion after the chair's race was decided to bring it back. and they may be doing that for political reasons. I suspect personally, having been to a lot of conventions, that the scenario would be more likely that after the first vote and get through the chairs race, people will be like, wow, that took 2.5 hours. That was really long. Maybe we should try this electronic thing. I suspect that would be the more likely scenario, but, you know, it is politics, and anything can be gamed, and no matter how much we write. The reason that Robert's Rules of Order is so lengthy is because that people have been trying to game the system for, you know, better part of a century, and that's why it's a lengthy document, and it still isn't perfect, because in the end, people wishing to do nefarious things can do nefarious things, but it's up to the majority, or in some cases 2/3, to stop them, and that's the balance that is tried to strike. So personally, I'm not so worried about the gaming the chairs race thing that I outlined, only because I've watched people try to do that and it fails every time, but it's there. So, not that particular thing, but, you know, people who try to game the process to get somebody to become the chair, it never works. Not while I've been involved. Yeah. Anyway. Anyone else want to speak to this amendment? All we're doing is adding if approved, comma, and then fixing the case on electronic. Not seeing anyone else raise hands. I'm going to ask if there's any objection, and you can object vocally or with a motion, hand raise, or anything like that. Any objection? Make sure. Not seeing any objections, so I am going to rule that passes. So the amendment has been amended. Mr. Latham.
Yeah, I just wanted to now move an amendment, and I'll re-put it in the chat. Just so at the beginning of that 7A, insert the words, if contemporaneous physical ballots are used, comma, those, and then we just continue on with the existing language. And the intention there is actually, you know, because we had the real short language, accommodate each delegate's ability to cast an electronic ballot. Well, as I read 7, that's kind of the default now. So we could just go by electronic ballot without using a contemporaneous physical ballot. So by inserting that additional language, you know, this just presents the option that, hey, we could also use contemporaneous physical ballots. And if we do that, this is the process that we use. But, and I guess I will say the word are used. How do the delegates express their preference for that is I think a question that is coming up for me. Do we need to do a separate vote on that? So is used the right word? So that's kind of where I'm at. But we could maybe just do the sense of the body when we take that vote in the order of business, whether it's just going to be all electronic or with contemporaneous physical ballots. But that was a question that came to my mind. So, but that's it.
Oh, Mr. Bracco.
I'd just like to verify with Mr. Latham, is what's on the screen the correct amendment that you'd like to make?
Yes, thank you.
All right. I want to speak to this very quickly. I actually like this language a lot. However, I don't know what Ms. Harlow's intent was on this phraseology. Like everything else, I kind of understand, and I've known her long enough to know. I'm trying to figure out if she was trying to, force it that it was always going to have a physical ballot along with electronic, that delegates were going to have to do both. It kind of feels that way, and I'd really like to hear her reasoning behind that. As the one who has been tallying all these votes, or responsible for training tellers who tally, and then she does the final tally. I'd really like to know what that was about. So, and just keeping in mind, by the way, we have about 23 or so minutes left in this meeting. And I don't know that we're going to get this completely done. If this were to pass, I would like to ask the body to allow Ms. Harlos to bring back the original language, even though that's usually out of order, only because she may have a very good reason that we're just not aware of. And I don't want to put us in a situation that, you know, now we've got to go through. I mean, you can always get out of it. You can always find a way to fix it with Roberts, but I want to make sure that it's understood that while I personally support this language, I also very much want to hear from Ms. Harlos as to why she chose this route. So, Mr. Latham.
Yeah, no, I agree. Was going to make the same point. Maybe we could do a motion to consider if we needed to, but yep, I just wanted to echo that.
Ms. Arrowwood.
Ms. Arrowwood needs to unmute.
Sorry, I was thinking perhaps we could strike if and insert when.
And if I could speak to that.
I'm sure. Go ahead.
Well, so I think the if is because I think we're giving ourselves options. If we say when, then we're locking ourselves into that.
No, you're not.
Oh, we're not.
Not when you say when. If it's because it could be that there is no when. It's only when there's a physical ballot. This happens.
But so this is my question. Where in our convention process do we make that determination of using contemporaneous physical ballots or not?
I think, my opinion, if this language were to pass as it sits right now, and if this amendment were to pass and then everything else passed as it sits, that the proposal that comes forward as to how the voting system would work would have to include or exclude using physical ballots in conjunction with electronic, or if it's only electronic. That would be, and then that vote early in the convention would determine if that was what was going to happen, or if we're just going to always use physical. That's my gut in how I understand how this would work right now. I could be wrong. I'm very open to other interpretations, but that's how I read it. So I see no one else's hands up right now. I just want to make sure we'll be okay. I don't think. Oh, there's Mr. Bracco. Go ahead, Mr. Bracco.
So, is it that basically this whole structure requires a proposed system? That proposed system has to be 90 days in advance, all that stuff. You're required to do that, and then is it correct that that proposed system would either be fully an electronic system, or it could be, if we're using the phrase contemporaneous physical ballots, it could be either or, but that's sort of like the proposal is what it is, and it's either yes from the delegates or no from the delegates. And that's sort of how you would decide. Would that be correct?
I think so. From my interpretation of this, right? If you remember at the last convention where, what's his name? Shoot, can't remember his name. That's terrible. I talk to him almost every week. Made the motion to have the chairs race decided in a cage match. And my response to that was, do you have a cage? Do you have the facilities to do this? If the system that is proposed doesn't support contemporaneous physical ballots, then it is an absurd, it can't pass, right? If the system didn't support it, it couldn't happen. It'd have to be a thing that could be in order for it to be able to be voted on. So I'm now I've tangled up my own thoughts on this, but does that make sense? What I was trying to, the scenario that whatever gets proposed has to support whatever the delegates pass. They would technically have the ability, I think, to amend the system, but only insofar as the system would support that amendment. Like if you said that only people, well, that's a dumb example. That's a dumb analogy. You can't make the impossible, you can't vote on the impossible, right? You can't vote that in because it doesn't work. You can't, it would be out of order because you don't have the means to do it. So, I believe. I think Mr. Latham had his hand up first.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe give my 2 cents worth on Mr. Bracco's question. I think, as Ken, you said, you could kind of finagle this at the beginning. It's not just a up or down. If the convention committee says we're doing the contemporaneous physical ballot and take it or leave it, I think the convention, if they just wanted to go straight electronic balloting, they could do that. And also, I don't think the impossibility is going to be a case here, because I think it would not be terribly difficult for delegates to say, hey, we're going to just use OPA vote, for example, or hey, we're going to use OPA vote, but we're also going to have people write on a piece of paper their voting choice for this election. So it could be done. It could be done, is my point. But you probably get a bit of inertia by the system that's going to be, published 90 days in advance.
Mr. Bracco.
So, point of parliamentary inquiry. Would the published on the party website at least 90 days prior to the regular convention, the fact that that is necessary, would that restrict the delegates from amending that published proposal? Like, are they stuck with it and it's just yes or no? Or would they be permitted to amend it if desired?
That's a great question. That's a notice thing. How is that worded? We say published. Oh, but it's notice. Written notice of the voting system. Okay, so it is notice. That's a really good question.
And just,
Mr.
I'm not a
Arwood,
parliamentarian. We have Mr. Jacobs, so I'll probably defer to him. But I think the delegates could, again, by a 2/3, maybe something else, again, kind of chart a different course beyond what's in these rules. But maybe we should hear from Mr. Jacob.
And if Mr. Jacobs, if you don't mind, I'm just going to ask Ms. Arrowood, just because she's on the committee, if she would like to chime in first on this, and then I'm going to get to you as well. If there's no objection from the committee.
I'll pass to JJ.
Okay. If there's no objection, Mr. Jacobs.
I was afraid that Ms. Arrowwood was going to do that. Yes. Now, my understanding is that you have to give the account, you have to give the actual method for voting 90 days in advance on the website. Is that correct?
Yes, and we use the term written notice of the voting system to be used as published on the party's website at least 90 days prior to the regular convention.
Okay. That would limit you. That could not be suspended.
Good to know. Okay.
Yeah. So you would be locked into that method. You would, I'm just looking here trying to read the entire thing, because I'm frankly multitasking tonight. So I'm not, and it's very hot in my room. So let's see. I just wanted to read this over.
No problem. Just appreciate you being here, and you have no obligation to do so. So
No, and I think that's nice if that's the case, and that gives a little more certainty to what our
Yeah,
range of options are.
yeah, I am looking at it. Now, conceivably, you could say we're going to use number A, we're going to use method A and method B. And you could come up with multiple methods on there and saying you could pick one of them. That might be an order. But I think that if you're going to specify a particular system, that would be the only type of particular system that you could use. Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example, if I may. And this is obviously a bad example. Porcupine. If you were to authorize Porcupine, you could only use Porcupine or a manual ballot. And I'm not suggesting that you would use Porcupine. There are problems with it, but just to give you that example, that would be the only method that you could use. If you authorize Porcupine and Scantron, and you advertised both of those and gave notice for both of those things, then you might have a choice. Is that helpful?
Yes. And just to get a quick specific on that, let's say they say electronic and physical will be used for each vote, right? And the delegates say, we don't want to do the physical. We just want to do the electronic. Would they be able to sever those two? Would they be able to say, we're only doing the electronic?
Let me take a look here at this again.
Not a problem.
Okay. Looking at the way that it's worded now, maybe used instead of manual tabulation. This would permit the delegates, the way that it is worded, to just have electronic ballots. I don't see, unless there's something else in there about a record necessary.
I was going to say, can we scroll down? Because is that it? Remember, there might have been that recount language.
I think there was. That's why I'm kind of hedging my bets here. Okay. No, you would be required to have physical ballots as well, at least by implication. And I would also add that if you're going to do this and you're going to have that in there, you probably should say both physical and electronic ballots at some point, because you are almost creating an ambiguity there. You don't want to do that.
So, trying to think through here. Oh, I'm sorry. I see Mr. Latham's hand is up. Mr. Latham.
Sorry, it was an artifact. Although I am working on an amendment for that 8.
Okay. I have an idea on that as well, but it kind of falls into the same category as, I mean, it goes to what I said earlier about what is Mrs. Harlow's intent with this, and I don't want to speak to that because I'm not quite sure. But okay. So we have about 10 minutes left. I'd like to ask this. I don't think we've actually made this motion yet, right? Or did we? We did. I'm sorry. We did make this motion. It is a motion on the floor. Okay. Mr. Latham, would you have any hard objection if we table this to or lay on the table or push this off to our next meeting? I always script the terminology on that. That we hold this amendment to the next meeting. In that way, Ms. Harlow can be here to talk to what she's trying to accomplish with the physical and the electronic combined versus one or the other?
Yeah, this went.
We heard Ms. Arrowwood if she's trying to contribute, but yeah, I don't have an objection to that. Although it seems to me we could still kind of proceed through, and I believe it's the sense of this committee that we can go back, and if we're told no, that's not what I meant, we can accommodate those changes. So the value I think in doing these changes is so, because I was hoping if she participates in this meeting, I wonder, once you see it in, writing, your thoughts on how this is all going to work, maybe that changes on your mind. I think that happens to all of us as to what, your intention is there, and is the language you're proposing furthering your intent. So, and I do have this other amendment to 8 if we have time to squeeze that in, or if we want to extend time.
I see Mr. Bracco has his hand up. Mr. Bracco.
So you're wanting to, are you asking for a motion to postpone to the July 27th meeting?
Thank you for using the proper terms that I always screw up. That is essentially yes. Well, I was asking Mr. Latham if he would be okay with that we postpone this particular amendment until that time, when Ms. Harlos could join us and speak for or against it, or have another, amendment.
I would like to clarify, when you're saying postpone this amendment, is this just the green, or is it the entire proposal?
At this time, I was just suggesting the green. It is my intent to not actually pass this amendment this evening. Given the amount of time we have left, given that we've got another motion coming on number 8, that it's going to be of the same nature and probably end in the, if this were to happen, I would ask the same thing, because they're really related, probably. I haven't seen the motion, but probably related. We would pick back up with Ms. Harless's amendment as the amendment, as the item of business, and then we have the one or two items that had been postponed, which then we just, I think, pick back up again. That's my intent. Let's put it that way. My intent is to suggest that we don't get all the way through this, so that Ms. Harlos has the opportunity to speak specifically to this, given her specific credentials and her experiences.
Okay. So moved.
So we're moving to postpone the proposed amendment to the amendment that is in green to our next meeting. Mr. Brecker, your hand is up right now. If you don't mind taking that down, because I'm going to ask if there's objection. And I'm going to let you raise your hand or speak, either one. Don't care.
So there's some
Mr. Latham.
There's some suggestions in the chat that we can move to adjourn and maintain our parliamentary posture. And there's another comment in there by JJ that if we can only that's by Mr. Madden, can only postpone a main motion. And I don't know that this is a main motion, just the green language. So again, I think we can accomplish our intent by moving to adjourn, and that way we can just come back and pick it up where we left off at our next meeting.
We could do that. I was hoping to see your proposal on number 8, but what we can do is we can get a sneak peek at that after we adjourn, and maybe we get what we've done so far published to the list, so we can keep kicking tires in the 2 weeks in between, so that we can finally get through this. I really feel like we're super close. I really do feel like we're close.
I agree.
So that's exciting. So, I heard murmurs of potential adjournment, but I didn't hear a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
I hear a motion to adjourn. Do we need a second on the motion to adjourn in the committee? I don't even know. You know what? I'll second it. I don't care. If it needs it, I did it. Is there anyone opposed to adjourning at this time? Any objection? All right. Not hearing any objection. We are adjourned at 10:43 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you all for coming and putting up with me being the chair. I am not the best chair out there. I just try to make sure everybody gets heard that wants to be heard.